Hello and a warm welcome to our Irish Angle show, coming a little bit later than usual in the week. Normally do it on a Monday, but this is Wednesday this week. And as usual, I've Emma Nagle and Johnny Ward with me. And we're going to go through everything that's happened. Not a huge amount of racing, admittedly, in the last week, but lots of other interesting stories to chat about. Emma, Johnny, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Minnie?
Now, start off with one. JJ Slevin, after picking up a new job, he's going to be retained rider in Ireland and the UK for Simon Munir and Isaac Swade, the double green colours. Big news with Daryl Jacob retiring out of it, and he's staying part of the background team there with double green. But what do you make of this, Emma? It's nice for JJ Slevin, but at the same time, bit of a shock at the weekend because he didn't ride some of their top horses that are in Willie's yard.
Yeah, I suppose it'll be the same arrangement as Daryl had. Daryl kind of had, I think, second choice after Paul and all the Willie's horses, and I think the fun was maybe a bit different. I think Paul or Patrick has an arrangement to ride that. I think he bred her, and there's some kind of a deal going on there. So I wouldn't read too much into JJ not riding that, because I'd imagine Paul would have voted if he had the choice as well. But look, I suppose he was the obvious candidate for the job. Like, he's obviously had a connection with the Crawfords for a while, and he obviously rode the Irish national winner in the colours last year as well. And it's interesting. When I was actually looking in to see how many horses they have in the UK now, and just like looking on the Irish racing side there, the last couple of weeks they haven't had much. I think anything the Crawfords ran an air, and in the next week coming there's no whole pile either. But I presume they still have a few tipping around with a couple of trainers in England, but the majority seem to be here in Ireland. But like, even getting the second string, I'd imagine he will be behind Paul on those Willie horses. And you saw the success Daryl had on those when Paul was on something else. So it's still a great job to get. And I'd say JJ is probably one who really deserves it as well. He's kind of consistently being one of the most busy jockeys in Ireland, and he's kind of showcased, I suppose, in the last year or two how well he can do when he gets to go on the big stage. So yeah, I think it's a good appointment. And even he mightn't have the first choice of Willie, it's still not a bad place to be second choice in there, I'd say.
Yeah, and he had a great Christmas as well. He rode a couple of Grade 1 winners as well for Joseph, didn't he? What do you make of this, Johnny? Just generally, how does Willie juggle all of this with the owners? Because he's got JP McManus with horses in the yard, where JP is allowed to have his retained jockey or whoever he wants on any of his runners. And now you've got the Munir and Isaac Swade ones, and it's a no to them that Paul is going to ride those ones and so on. It must be very tricky managing all of that.
Yeah, like it came to mind there when Willie had a preview day. I think you were there, Emma, and I actually can't even remember what it was for now, but it was probably for Punchestown or something like that. But it was after Dino Blues run in Cheltenham, and it was obvious he wasn't overly happy with the way the race developed. And I thought that was an interesting insight into Willie and JP McManus, who for me are fairly unlikely bedfellows in many respects because of the McManus operation, as we all understand it as well, and the amount of money JP spends on horses. He's well entitled to lay horses out for a gamble here or there with various yards, and I think that's been his MO for a long time. But at the same time, I did a piece with Willie recently in the Sunday Business Post, or the Business Post rather, where he said he didn't like having gambling owners. It was one thing he wasn't mad about because he'd have a horse finish second or third, he'd be delighted with it, and then the owner would have lost money and it would sort of sour the whole thing. So he said one thing he was happy about as his operation was not having gambling owners, and that stuck with me. So if Willie's relationship with his owners is probably a little bit different. I feel your blog is well worth reading here without blowing smoke up your hole. I just think it's this whole idea of owners and trainers and the relationship between them is fascinating because I've been involved in horses with different trainers, and you kind of have a sense of loyalty, particularly if it goes well. And you do sort of feel if the trainer, and this isn't always the case, if the trainer is honest with you and sound to deal with, that you'll be kind of more inclined to go back to him or her. On the JJ Slevin thing, it wasn't at all a surprise that he got the job after Daryl's retirement. And best of luck to Daryl in his future career. I like JJ's developed into a really good rider. I'm not really sure the concept of retained riders for owners is necessary at all. You look at Jigginstown and Michael and Eddie, probably not the easiest to ride for at times. I'm sure you're well paid and all of that, but you'll see the way that some riders lost out there and all of that. And is it really necessary? Do you need to tell Willie Mullins to put a specific rider on instead of Paul Townend? Do you need to do the same at other yards? I'm not sure why owners specifically, especially when they don't have a load of horses, need a retained rider. you know, and they have the money to do it. But for me, it's not necessary at all. The horses should probably be ridden by the jockeys that know them well, you know, from the yard. But that being said, I'm not sure what I tried to do a bit of digging on this morning. I'm not sure what the JJ situation is in relation to Willie. Obviously, fun was bred by Patrick, and he spoke about that afterwards, where he essentially asked the owners, could he ride? I don't think the interview referenced JJ, but in any event, it'll be interesting going forward how this works out. But on a personal level for JJ, I'm delighted. You know, considering the injury he had a phenomenal Christmas. He's in his early 30s, I think now, give or take. So kind of coming into his prime, and I'd say Joseph will be quite amenable as well to him kind of riding for the other guys. But this will be interesting because there will be some nice horses, very nice horses that I'm just not sure who's going to ride them going forward if they're trained by Willie Mullins.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I would disagree with you somewhat there on that about retained riders. I can definitely see an advantage in having your own jockey that you know is going to ride them. You know he's riding for you. He's not riding for anyone else as well. Is a major thing. And the other thing is it must be drive owners mad when you've got a horse in, he's declared to run, say, tomorrow somewhere. And there's all these jockeys agents and they're juggling who they've got, and you're potentially getting one of the top riders on your thing, and then it turns out at the last minute it's switched. He's gone to ride for someone else, and you're stuck with some journeyman jockey who you didn't necessarily want. I'd say it's a bit of a mess now. Whereas I can see why even the likes of a Barry Connell, although he only has a few horses, he likes to know he's got his man on board, whoever that may be, because he keeps.
But that didn't work out, Vinny.
No, it doesn't necessarily work out, but I can see why you would do it. Like in theory, it's a good idea, I think. What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, no, I can see. I agree with you, Vincent. Like, I think it's not even on the race course. Like, I think Darrell was doing an awful lot of work kind of in the background with the horses for Simon Munir and Isaac Swade. I think working horses and Willies and working young horses and then feeding straight back to the owners. Like, it's kind of a direct line of contact after work and stuff like that. Like, I can see the point of it. Like, if I had a string of horses like them, I'd definitely be retaining a rider as well. I think it's more to do with just on the race course, and kind of like you said, maybe on a smaller level, it is really frustrating. Like, it can be hard to get good riders for the likes of talking lower than what they'll be at, but like the likes of big handicap chases and stuff. Like, you might have a really good rider riding them all along in all the smaller races, and then they'll have a bigger ride for a bigger yard in the big race, and you're stuck with someone who's never sat on the horse before. So it's really frustrating. And I think like having a rider on board, even if they hadn't ridden them on the racetrack before, but just knowing them from home and knowing their personality and what they like and what they don't like, it's a massive advantage to a horse, and it's a massive advantage to owners and trainers. So yeah, no, I'd be with you there. I do see a case for retained riders. Like, even if you didn't have a massive string, but if you have good horses and you have the money to do it, I don't know why you wouldn't.
The thing, like the whole article about the owners, trainers, just to go on to that again. I see your point on it, and I see why if you have the money you could afford it. But the idea, like, for me, the owner pays the bills, and it should be absolutely up to the owner what happens to the horse. And I mean that, like, the trainer is just he's renting the house, but I own the house, like, and I basically am the person who has to be responsible for that. I'm paying the bills every month, hopefully anyway. And it's if I want the horse to run the champion hurdle, he or she runs the champion hurdle. It was interesting. I was just texting Eddie O'Leary this morning that, like, the respect that he would have for Gordon in terms of Gordon's decision making, because you pointed out in the blog, Vinny, that in relation to brighter days ahead, that there almost seems to be a difference of opinion between owner and trainer there. And in my view, it should be entirely down to the owner, absolutely down to the owner, where a horse runs, if he runs, if he doesn't run, if she runs, if she doesn't run, because I pay the bills and that's my responsibility. But the problem is, with specific yards, that if you enter a pact with that trainer, that may not necessarily be the case, and that's what you kind of sign up for.
Yeah, well, I suppose, look, there's an element here. Not every owner knows enough about the planning, race planning, and the type of things that would suit. Like, you might have an owner saying, "Oh, look, I want to go and run in that graded race next week," and the trainer says, "If you run in that and you finish fifth, you're going to go up 20 pounds. You'll never win a handicap again." This type of stuff. Like, that's why you pay the trainer big bucks to train the horse, and he should be the one who makes those decisions, I would have thought, and perhaps to some level on the riders as well. But it's a tricky situation, isn't it, Emma?
Yeah, I'd agree. Like, some owners, look, if it come down to a decision like something like, are you going to run in the Supreme or the Ballymore, maybe then the owner has the final say. But like, if it's planning out a route to a handicap, I think the trainer really more than likely will know more than the owner about the things. And owners might be demanding to run a horse here and there, and the track won't suit, the ground won't suit, the horse might be ready to go. Yeah, I think I think the majority of the time the trainer probably will know best, but like on some decisions I can see maybe the owner should have the final call, like, you know, running in one big race rather than another, you know, Champion Chase or Ryanair or Supreme Novice or Ballymore, where, you know, the horse might have an equal chance in both. It probably should come down to there, but I think the majority of the time the trainer probably might be a bit biased now, but the trainer probably might know a bit more.
I agree with you. Don't get me wrong here now. Like the relationship, like from my experience, basically and having been involved in syndicates or owning horses in general, you go with what the trainer says. Like, I'm not trying to say like there are disagreements, because by and large, the trainer sees the horse every day, knows the horse way, way better than you. And the trainer says, like, this is what I suggest should happen. But the trainer shouldn't be dictating to the owner, because the owner is paying the bill. So if the owner wants the horse to run at Cheltenham because he wants to bring his wife over or whatever, that's the prerogative. And the trainer, I've often had interviews with trainers where they said, listen, we ran the horse because the owner was home from England and whatever, like we basically, and that's fine, like, but you can't, I mean, if you're paying the bills, ultimately the trainer can't be like dictating everything to you either. So 99% of the examples in my head would be what the trainer says the owner is happy enough with, but ultimately the owner should be able to decide if there is a disagreement of opinion, because he or she is paying the bills.
All right, we'll move on quickly to another similar thing, is the New Lion, which JP McManus has paid telephone numbers for. In the Skelton yard was with Darren Yates, and he's talking about getting out of the game at some point later in the year and everything else. He was a big money owner, purchasing some very expensive horses, a few flops along the way. But anyway, he had a good one now, up to now anyway, the New Lion, and he's decided to sell it. It's gone to JP, but interesting, stays in the Skelton yard, and Harry Skelton will keep the ride, which is interesting in this whole thing about who rides what and everything else. But that was part of the deal done with the previous owner, because he wanted that. And there's also some kickback seemingly going forward, that if the horse wins certain races, he picks up bonuses as well from JP. So I'd say it's a lucrative little deal being done there. What do you make of that, Emma?
Yeah, I'd imagine he didn't go cheap anyway, the horse. He was impressive, and like he's one of the leading protagonists now for the British coming up to the Cheltenham Festival. It's a strange one, like, because he's an owner, like we've seen him spending like telephone numbers on horses. You know, I think two that might, well, Interconnected was probably the big one. He was the most expensive national hunt horse at the time. He paid 620,000 for him. Did he miss a load of time and he never ended up winning a race? And then he must have wanted a Grand National winner, and he went away and he bought Black Lion for 300,000, wasn't it? And he missed the race. And then a few months later, a few weeks or months later, whatever, he went away and bought Don Polly, like both veterans, just one in the Grand National, and he spent, was it almost 500,000 on the pair of them. Like, it was crazy money. And now he's kind of come along an up and coming, you know, really exciting novice hurdler, and he decides to sell it. It's strange, but I was listening to his interview on Nagle Daily, and it kind of sounded as if the decision to leave the sport was made before kind of they realised the potential of this horse. He was kind of saying at the start of the year that you know, himself and the wife sat down and said, you know, we might have had enough of this sport, and they kind of said it to Dan Skelton, and Dan Skelton kind of urged him to hang on to the horse until he ran or whatever, and it all worked out in the end anyway. The horse won his grade 1, and they obviously got big money. But I thought his reasons for leaving the sport were interesting and like quite worrying as well. Like when you think about, you know, this is obviously a man who's been spending big money, and he felt that the owners weren't being treated well enough in the UK anyway. At least I thought one thing that kind of stuck out in his mind. Now he said kind of afterwards he didn't want to be targeting entry, because he thought that the northern tracks in the UK did treat the owners quite well in comparison to the southern tracks. But just one thing that stuck out in my mind was he was saying how on ordinary race days in Aintree that the owners we put out in kind of a big room with a kind of panoramic view of the race course, glass walls and all that. It was lovely. And then when it came to National Day, they were putting a marquee out the back, and this fabulous owners and trainers facility was sold off for big money to the public, or, you know, corporate boxes or whatever. It was kind of like it's hard to believe that the owners are being treated like that, you know, especially on a day like the Grand National. You'd imagine that like the owners who've been paying fees for these horses for years and years, most of the time spending an awful lot of money, and they've come to the big day, they're throwing out an marquee out the back of the race course. It's bizarre, and it's, you know, he hasn't been the only one to kind of say this, I suppose, and he was kind of bemused by the amount of prize money and stuff like that. So it's definitely worrying to see someone who spent so much money and seemed to be kind of getting good sport out of horse racing to kind of be saying this and leaving it when he's come upon this horse. But looks an exciting one for JP anyway, and JP's kind of been doing this in the last few years, hasn't he? Like he's been kind of buying these horses who've kind of already proven themselves, and it's been working out so well so far anyway.
Yeah, and he's got plenty of them, hasn't he? He's got Corbett's Cross as well. I see he's entered for the Gold Cup as well, another one of those ones. Just moving on to a few other things. We've loads of stuff to cover this week, it turns out. Paul Nolan, a horse he had that finished third in the Albert Bartlett in 2023, Sandor Clegane. Now, it's one I remember fondly because I had him in a place pot that day. I got up 30 pence worth of the place pot that day in Cheltenham, and it paid very well, I have to say. You can look it up if you want to see what it paid, but it was a nice touch for me at the time. But it turns out he's after getting disqualified. There was it's minor enough infringement, in fairness. It was minor enough drugs he was given. They're only Class B, not Class A drugs, but it turned out he didn't fill in paperwork properly and a few other things with it, and they didn't give enough time for the medicines to go out of the horse's system. So tested positive. He's been fined $2.5 grand in total, which is a fair little fine. And it was fast tracked in the end, which is gas because it took 2 years. But anyway, they didn't go through the whole procedures, which is a good thing. Look, in a lot of these cases, you see this with how much it's costing the industry as a whole when you have these cases with the IHRB or the BHA where everyone's legaled up with barristers and solicitors and everything, and it costs a fortune. In this one, he put his hands up. They knew he had done wrong, so they said, look, it's only basic, so they don't go through the whole process, which I think is a fair thing to do. What do you make of that, Johnny? It's minor enough, I suppose, but it certainly grabs headlines.
Yeah, like it's mad stuff. I mean, we're nearly going on 2 years now, like, and obviously, in fairness, I think Paul putting his hands up helps. Like, I think trainers at times can really not help the sport and themselves in terms of, I know it's kind of a game of you're trying to hide stuff from the handicapper and that, but like trainers can come up with some absolute fairy tale stories that don't do their reputation any good. I've always found Paul brilliant to deal with. And you know, I guess it is what it is. It's a bit mad that it's nearly 2 years ago. On the Darren Yates stuff, you're just reading the piece this morning. I think he referenced Paul Byrne 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in an article about the sale of the horse. And if it's to be believed, and I think this is true, that Darren won his money by putting his last few quid on Frankie's 7-timer. Like, so he's probably one of the luckiest punters you'll ever come across, trying to bet in one jockey to win 7 races at a meeting. But you know, it's an interesting outcome, that. I've always felt if I had money, I wouldn't be mad on buying ready-made horses necessarily, but JP obviously loves a winner at Cheltenham. But it sounds like Paul Byrne was really badgering about this horse. He really loved him if you read the interview, and best of luck to him. I'm certainly happy that the British have a good contender for one of the novice races. Do you know, it was mad the other day. I was looking at the Supreme Novice Hurdle is 10 to 1 the field in January, which is practically unheard of. But this lad, he won't be going there, I'd imagine, but it's interesting to see where he goes going forward. But that is a mad case. You think when you have a horse as good as that, you'd hold on to him. But best of luck to JP. Obviously, his relationship with Paul Byrne is been getting stronger with every minute.
Yeah, a couple of other things here just to mention. A couple of other court cases going on currently. One of them is John Dance, who was a major owner as well, race sponsor and everything. He had that likes of that multiple Group 1 winner Lawrence. He owned her. He also was a part owner in Brave Man's Game, and there was controversy over that a year or so ago when this whole thing blew up. Basically, he's alleged to have used £64 million worth of clients' money to pursue his racing interests and fund his lavish lifestyle. So I don't know where it goes. He had 9 charges up against him last week, and he said not guilty to all 9 of them. So we'll see where that plays out. And then another one I see is ongoing at the moment is John Warwick. You might remember this from back in November 2021. There was a raid on him when he came over to Ireland. He used to come over regularly to treat horses with leg trouble, was the basic thing. And there were a few high-profile trainers present when the IHRB and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine raided the place. Seemingly they found anabolic steroids and other things, and he's up in court. There was an initial hearing last month, but it's been deferred now till adjourned until January 17th in Portlaoise District Court. Basically, John Warwick is 74 and he's suffering from cancer, and he's getting treatment for it at the moment in the UK, which is why they've had to put the thing back. So it's hard to know where this will all end up or how long it'll take. I don't know whether you have any thoughts on any of that, Johnny.
Yeah, like I've never known John Warwick. That whole case was it was very worrying. It was, you know, the sort of thing that Paul Kimmage, who obviously doesn't report on racing really in any sort of positive sense, he's going after the stories he would have reported on. You would hope, and I mean, you wouldn't wish this on anyone really, that he's 74 and he's getting on and he is quite sick. But there was still I felt there were the whole world of medicine in racing for me is just so murky that it's not clean, but it's not necessarily as sort of corrupt as you think either. The reality is always somewhere in the middle in terms of like a lot of the stuff is just horses out of training or horse with injuries getting kind of fast tracked in their recovery, and it's not actually particularly bad thing per se if it's done right. But you know, if this is just going on now, we really do need some answers from this as to what happened. I feel anyway, it's gone on a long time. I mean, what are we talking? This is earlier in this decade, so the guts of 5 years now, and I do feel that we do need some answers as to what actually happened that time.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that drives me mad is, you know, you talk about all the different things with horse racing, the different people outside of the actual racing itself that are making money out of it, whether they be sales companies and breeding establishments and everything else and feed companies. But the pharmaceutical side of it is unbelievable, isn't it? Like, I don't know how it ever got to this level that it turns out every single yard is like a chemist shop, isn't it, at this stage with the amount of stuff? Your dad's place must be the same, is it? You've concoctions and bottles and all sorts of things and remedies for every little ailment. It just seems unbelievable that it got to that level.
Yeah, I suppose everyone's making money in racing except the owners.
Yeah.
Look, I suppose I just on the Paul
And the
Nolan thing,
trainers,
I was only reading into it this morning, and it sounded fierce, like, or just kind of bad luck, because I think the horse had been prescribed this. It's a remedy for horses tying up, I think, and he was prescribed it back in November to kind of use on a need to use basis, and they had consulted the vet, I think, and the vet said it would take 56 hours to go out of the system, but it took a bit longer in the end. So that all kind of seemed kind of innocent enough. I kind of saw it blown up on social media a bit, but yeah, it was kind of just misfortune, I suppose. And the BHA, like the fast track thing, is incredible. Like how could this take 2 years to solve that? And like if it was fast track, like how much longer could it have possibly taken? Like Paul Nolan kind of put his hands up and he kind of accepted, like he accepted that he didn't fill out the form properly or whatever it was. And so I don't really know what the hold up with all that was. It's a bit of a joke, really.
Anyway, we'll move on to actual horse racing now. We have Cheltenham entries out yesterday for 3 of the big chases. The Gold Cup, 19 entered. Most of them are Irish. What you make of this, Johnny? No major surprise. Well, one major surprise maybe is Spillane Tower, not in the Gold Cup, goes for the Ryanair. Only entry so far for the horse.
Yeah, I thought that was a small bit strange. Like he obviously disappointed the King George, but I mean, this horse, I've said this before, if you're bred by walking the park and you get 3 miles, like, you have a lot of class and stamina, you can be a really potent force, which we saw at Punchestown. And I'd have, given his inexperience, I'd have readily enough for giving him the run at Kempton, or certainly giving him another chance. JP has, like, you know, Fact File, he's Corbett's Cross, he has, I know the way you're thinking, he's good horses that are, for me, still very much in the picture, are certainly very much in the picture to some extent. If you take out Galvin Deschamps, in Fact File, I certainly wouldn't be ruling him out. But yeah, it is interesting. I wouldn't. I would have just had him in the race anyway, just in case. So it gives Jimmy Mangan a good idea where we're going. The problem with Cheltenham now, as we've seen, with the weather is so erratic, it's absolutely impossible to call what the ground will be at Cheltenham. Like, it could be heavy, it could be good to soft, we don't know. So if you're betting anti-post, I think bear that in mind. You literally have no idea what the ground will be like, as we've seen in recent years, and whether it might even be unraceable, who knows. So the ground will be a massive factor for him. But I was a bit surprised, because I thought he was still. His story hadn't been written over 3 miles too, and they could have just left a late decision, but there we go.
Yeah. The other one with that is, I see you talking about the ground and everything else, and you've got the French horse, Il est Francais. He's in all 3 of these. He's in the 2 miler, he's in the 2 mile 5, and he's in the 3 mile 2. What did you make of those entries, Emma? Any major shocks for you?
Yeah, I suppose Spillane's Tower not being in the Gold Cup was the big one. Factor Files in the Ryanair as well, but you can imagine he might go for the Gold Cup now if Spillane's Tower might go there. Yeah, Il est Francais and Banbridge, they're both in the 3 chases, so they're keeping all options open. I thought like the Gold Cup entry, like 19 entries, I think, like before the Savills chase, or just after the Dundurkin, maybe we were kind of saying this could be one of the best Gold Cups of all time, but it's kind of nearly fallen apart completely after that Leopardstown run. Like, and it's worrying enough for like the state of British racing, because 19 entries, 5 from the UK, and I think the shortest price UK runner can be back to 25 to 1. Like, it's mad. Like, where are these staying chasers in the UK? And at Galopin des Champs, like even money odds on. The Gold Cup has kind of fallen apart a bit already, which is a bit of a pity. But maybe that's just what happens when you have a star in the division, maybe.
Yeah, I think it is. And the champion hurdle could end up the same by the time it comes along, but we'll wait and see. Looking back now, last Sunday we had racing, proper national hunt racing in Nace, though it ended up in a bit of a snowstorm at the end. We saw some good performances, I think. Fun. Il Atlantique beating Firefox and In the Pocket, and the Yellow Clay with Jasmine DeVoe only fourth in that Lauders and Nace race. What did you make of that, Johnny? Did you watched it, I presume?
Yeah, I was contemplating going, and the guy I was going to go with, he couldn't go. He wasn't feeling that well, and I think I felt sorry for Nace because I was literally the fair weather race goer on Sunday. I just decided that it was going to be far too miserable. In Dublin, it was we never got any snow where I was on Sunday, but it was almost like the worst type of weather in the sense that it was just a little bit too warm for it to be snowy, but it was really wet and very, very cold, so it was absolutely horrible. So I was admiring Pat Healy and the lads who were getting the good photos at Nace because it was that opportunity. But got like for poor old Nace, like last year was called off after a race or two with fog. And this year the crowd would have been decimated. I mean, you couldn't see anything for the last 2 or 3 races. So I know it was important that the meeting went ahead, but it definitely took away from the spectacle as the races went on. Now, some of the earlier races weren't too bad in terms of the optics. Il Atlantique was definitely one of them. Felt he was very good. Like In the Pocket for me was desperately disappointing. I backed Firefox in the race. I thought he was the value. Now, in the end, the ground probably did go for him, but I wasn't all that disappointed in him. I thought he ran okay and he could still be a player at Cheltenham. But Il Atlantique was very, very good. Probably in hindsight was the bet in the race. He's a real mud lover as well. Got a real strong horse who's gotten better over fences. Some of the other performances, Fun was very good. She really was very good. The two de Bromhead horses absolutely bombed out in that race. That was the one thing I'd be worried about. And Willie dominated a 1, 2, 3, but she was very good. I really like the Yellow Clay, I have to say. Like, I have a mate of mine who brings me to the odd race meeting in the West, and James Lohan, and he was telling me he's back Super Sunday for the Ballymore since last year when he ran at Cheltenham, and he only won his maiden, was it at Ballinrobe subsequently. So he has a bit of a life. He's backed him at 100-1. And there were some disappointments in the race, as you mentioned. With the Yellow Clay, the first homebred Grade 1 winner for Nolan Moore, and I did a piece with him in the Currency at the weekend, and I think that gave him an awful lot of pleasure. Like the money he's putting into the local area, he's one of these trainers that's very much, I'm going to have my horse with Gordon Elliott if they're in Ireland. He's very much about me. And to breed this horse, Yates is, for some reason, I still think he's a far better sire than people make out. He gets plenty of very good horses, and the Yellow Clay, he just keeps on progressing. And I understand he's actually going to stay at this sort of trip at Cheltenham. I'd be nearly stepping him up to 3 miles at least in time, but very, very good performance. And the horse in the bumper was good as well, Vinny. Like that race, it was a mad one. Like I thought, I love that race at Nace because they're 4-year-olds. They're nearly all, most of them are primarily flatbreds. And I was sort of thinking who's going to actually get home in this. But Light Up the Dark, who's by Camelot, was well touted. I think they mentioned on Racing TV there was word for the horse early. She was very, very good. Like she bolted up. And she could be quite an exciting horse going forward. But for me, the star was the Yellow Clay on the day, and Sam Ewing, who is just one of these no-nonsense lads, just does the job, gets up, and has obviously been deputising for Jack Kennedy. He's had an unbelievable season, Sam, and he's one of these, I'd say as a trainer, he's an absolute joy to have because he's quiet, he just does his job, doesn't give out, he just gets on with it, is happy for the opportunity, lives a good life, real professional, and probably really well brought up by Warren and the family and all that. And he's had a great season, but I thought the Yellow Clay was the best of them for me.
Good stuff. Just one thing you touched on there was the de Bromhead horses ran below par, which is a bit odd considering only 2 or 3 weeks earlier they couldn't lose. They were banging in winners all over the place. Remember Stevens' day, the first couple up in the north, the first in Limerick, the first in Leopardstown as well. They were flying that day. And for the couple of weeks before, Darragh O'Keefe was winning all round them. What do you make of that, Emma? That was a bit of a blip, wasn't it?
Yeah, I actually was thinking that myself, what Johnny said. After the 2 mares ran in the first race, I was kind of thinking, like, they definitely didn't run their race. They definitely didn't run the race at all. Like even the form of the one Rachel with Majestic Force, like she had beaten the third horse handily the last time in Cork, like so you could put a line through that for her. And Lancia Lady just didn't finish out her race whatsoever. And then they had a horse in the next race, the Handicap Chase. He kind of seemed to bomb out completely. So that kind of put me off In the Pocket, to be honest. In the 2 mile, like for whatever reason, the horses just weren't finishing out the races. I know look, I don't know if it's something or am I reading too much into it, but definitely don't think Henry's horses were maybe performing to their best ability on the day. I was really impressed by it in Atlantique, to be honest. Where he'll lie in the Arkle picture now was a bit of a question. Like you'd imagine, like the likes of
I'd say he's definitely better on bad ground, Emma.
He is, yeah. Like if it came up real heavy in Cheltenham, like you were saying, it's kind of hard to predict. But like you just still imagine you couldn't really fancy him against the likes of Sergino or a Majborough. But definitely looks a better horse for fences. Paul was kind of saying after he won the first day that he had gotten a lot stronger as well. So probably a horse with a nice enough future. But I still probably wouldn't be backing him for an Nagle. And I was impressed by the yellow clay as well. Like same as you, Johnny. I didn't really prefer him stepping up to 3 miles, like given the conditions, and he just kind of looks like a bit of a slogger, doesn't he? I think he's cut to about 8-1 for the Albert Bartlett and 7-1 for the Turners. So I'd probably be backing him for the Albert Bartlett if I was going to back him for anywhere. But Jasmine DeVoe was really disappointing as well. But Ruby was really cold to him actually beforehand on Racing TV.
So was Willie actually to an extent.
Yeah, he was kind of saying like he's not sure how good this horse is, and I don't know, he just doesn't seem to like hurdles at all. Like he just doesn't jump well. I thought the first day, like when he won his maiden hurdle, the race worked out quite well. Like the second and third came out and won after it, but jumped awful that day and just couldn't get away with it in the Grade 1, I suppose. But yeah, the yellow clay kind of he didn't impress me before that, to be honest. But he put a good marker down now, I'd say, for Cheltenham.
Like the novice division, whatever. I mean, Romeo Coolio, I put him up in the champion bumper last season on the basis of his price. And I thought he ran a blinder, and he's developed into a proper hurdler. But like in my lifetime, I cannot remember, especially since the markets became so lively. Like we're on the 8th of January, 2 months from Cheltenham, and it's 10-1 the field pretty much. In certainly an odd check, it's 10-1 the field in the Supreme. That's incredible, really, when you think about it.
Yeah. I must say I was very disappointed myself with Jasmine DeVoe. I thought that would win because I thought it didn't jump that well the first day, but the form had worked out really well. As Emma said, the second and third had won since. But you would have thought stepping up and trip would have been the thing. Going 2.5 miles around Nace, to be going that shade slower, would jump better, but it didn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. The horse just wasn't good enough on the day. We'll see where that pans out. Anyway, looking ahead to the rest of this week, we've no real flat race or jump racing coming up till the weekend, where we're due to have Fairy House Saturday and then Punchestown Sunday. But the weather is a worry. We're talking here in Kildare, where I am, -8 tonight, and tomorrow night -5. So they're talking about it getting up to maybe 8 or 9 degrees by midday on Sunday, and it'll start thawing by Friday. But whether it's in time for Fairy House Saturday, I don't know. More likely, Punchestown will probably be okay, and we might get to see Salvador Mundi on Sunday. That'd be an exciting one, Emma, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he was kind of a big talking horse last year, wasn't he? I think we had Brian Hayes on the Cheltenham preview, and he was kind of saying he obviously has that former Sergino when they were in France, and Willie and Nicky bought the 2 horses out of the same race for the same owner, so there was a bit of competition there, I'd say, to see who found the better horse. You'd imagine it's Sergino at the moment, but yeah, the vibes seem to be strong enough about this horse. That Moscow Flyer, like that novice hurdle, like Willie tends to send one of his better novice hurdlers. Like last year, Mystical Power won it. The year before that, Imperial Pass, like Duvan, Min, Vitour, they've all won it in the past. So definitely one. Hopefully it'll be on now when he gets out. And there's a good novice chase as well on the card, Grade 3, and again, like historically produces a fairly good horse. Plans Tower, Bob Ollinger, and Boy Allen all won it in the last few years. So hopefully Punchestown goes ahead. Like if you're looking out the window here with me, like the place is covered in snow and ice. If there was racing in Tipperary at the weekend, I'd say to be 100-1, but hopefully it's a bit better up the country.
Yeah, hopefully it improves by the weekend. So looking ahead anyway, we got anything for people, a horse to follow, something that'll win for them. I think I've won.
Anything at all.
Go on, anything at all at this stage. We'd settle for anything. All weather will do us. Go on, Johnny, give us one.
Well, look, there's nothing virtual about a winner, as they used to say in the betting shop, which was a way of getting you betting on Cab Calloway and Steepledowns. But there's definitely nothing virtual about a winner of the all-weather. And like at this time of year, I know they were saying in Britain, like, we need to have a backup of all-weather racing these days if everything's called off for the Premier race days. It was an interesting thing, and like the all-weather is a bit of a godsend this time of year. I suppose the only problem Dundalk might have is travel, but I think it might be easing off a bit on Friday. But Rhythm and Time in the first race, Charles Burns went for I think he went for a double, or certainly 2 of his horses were well backed at Limerick when I was there at the Christmas. I think I might have spoken about that on a previous pod, but he's been in good form, Charles. And Rhythm and Time was a real Charles Burns gamble in a claimer the last day. He was, I don't know what price he was initially. We went off 100 to 30, touched off by a head. It didn't even look all that clear at the outset that he had been beaten. But it was a sort of a, his previous SPs, 40s, 33s, 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 25s, put into a claimer under Declan McDonough, just failed. He stayed on the same mark, which is fair enough. Darragh O'Sullivan has impressed me, takes 7 off. Runs in the 4 o'clock, Vinny, so we only have to wait for a winner or loser. The first race, the 4 o'clock on Friday. And wouldn't that be great to bring in the new year with the Charles Burns train winner in the 4 o'clock, the Apprentice Handicap?
All right, well, I'll go on 10 minutes after that. Right, Newcastle, the 4:10 in Newcastle on Friday. There's one I saw run on the 2nd of January called Eva Rosie, trained by Stella Barkley, ridden by Paul Mulrennan. He actually rode a treble on that day at Newcastle on the 2nd of January. But my God, you want to see this. Look, I won't even talk about it. Let people go and watch the rerun if you can see it on. It's on At The Races. You can see it on their site for free. So go on to attheraces.com and have a look at this race from the 2nd of January in Newcastle. Eva Rosie, and you tell me why this won't win on Friday. It runs in the 4:10, and Paul Mulrennan is back on board. I think this will win.
This sounds like me in a night out, Vinny. So tuck keen hold towards rear, steady headway, not clear run repeatedly, not recover. So
I haven't seen the head on now, so the not clear run is a slight question mark for me. But it certainly is one that's finished full of running. So we'll see how it gets on Friday. Emma, go on. Have you got one for us?
I don't have one for Dundalk. I missed the Dundalk memo here, but I thought there was a fair eye catcher in the first on at Nice on Sunday. That Carrier de Blaze for Willie. Maybe the race fell apart a bit with Henry's mares probably not running the race, but even watching back her first start in Cork, she was behind Gavin Cromwell's mare. She was impressive. That was it only by night. Yeah. She won in Cork that day, but she pulled fares hard in Mallow. Brian Hayes rode her, and she kind of travelled into the race fair's easy. And I'm just impressed by her jumping, and she seems to have a good attitude as well. Like kind of same story again in Nice at the weekend. Kind of seemed to take their time with her, but she travelled into the race well, jumped very well. Probably looking for a handicap mark, you'd imagine. She's only a 5-year-old. Like she was a decent juvenile hurdler, I suppose. She didn't do anything overly impressive, but she ran a good race in Fairyhouse one day. She was second behind that Miss Mansour, and Darby was behind her that day. Like he went on to run well in the Boodles and wasn't a bad horse. Neil Gordonelli was second in the Galway hurdle as well. So I'd say this Carrier de Blaze probably would have put in the tracker for a bit further down the line, possibly a handicap company. She'd be my one, I think.
Yeah, might turn up at the Dublin Racing Festival. There we go. If not Cheltenham, of course, after that. Anyway, thanks for watching and thanks for contributing, guys. Very enjoyable show. And we'll be back again next week. So if you are having a bet on any of those horses on Friday at 4 o'clock or 4:10, make sure to gamble responsibly. And do subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And we'll be back again next week for more of the same. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.